I'm writing around the concept of what it is that really fed us in our youth. And that could be food, that could be experiences. It can also be that gateway experience that really opened us up to lowering our shoulders and opening our hearts.
We have an extraordinary guest today on the Discover WellBeing Podcast, and I'm excited to introduce all of you to Paul Cure.
Hi, Allison. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Oh, thank you. So we have a conversation that is all around diversity, comfort, and the heart. And this is a way to nourish well-being. And Paul is quite the expert. So why don't we have you share with the listeners a little bit about your background and how that led you to where you are today and the work that you're doing in the world.
Yeah, I guess I would say as a Midwesterner, you always feel a little bit nervous talking about yourself. My upbringing is so much formed by the Midwest, and growing up in Grosse Pointe, Michigan, the youngest of four, in a Catholic family and going to Catholic school and really being formed by, I'm laughing because I'm of course wearing still my school uniform of khakis, a white shirt and a blue sweater. And I'm 48. I'm still dedicated to the cause here of my uniform. And I think, if anything, to that point around how we're raised, the values that I was really shown and still carry with me today are more along those lines of awareness, dedication to the task at hand, most importantly, family, and the ability to help each other when needed. And growing up the youngest, you're always trying to be the oldest, and so you're always trying to catch up to those ahead of you. And what that meant for me, it goes myself, my brother Michael, and then Jennifer and Mary Catherine. All the saints are covered. So everyone knows I take these beliefs in stride. It's always evolving. But growing up in that culture, as I've said before in other interviews, Grosse Pointe was such an interesting place to grow up because of the Ford family and the motor vehicles, in the sense of cross-cultural, really diverse neighborhoods. And so I grew up in an incredibly diverse upbringing. My best friends, RJ and Lawrence, were Filipino and Italian, and had the bologna sandwiches covered quite well in my household. But growing up with food in their household, and then the Middle Eastern contingent of Eastern Market in downtown Detroit, and that degree of being welcomed into multi-generational households, that really formed my understanding of what it meant to be part of a family. And so growing up in that, I always had this hunger to explore the world. And when I would hear, this is how in Catholic school you studied French, and I was like, oh, let's go to Paris. And I was fortunate enough to apply and then be accepted after my formal education, going to the American University in Paris and really getting a sense of how big the world was. And that was, once again, this cross-cultural. I walked into the place that I was going to live when I was accepted into Paris, and my roommate was from Togo. And I was like, where is Togo? Is that? And it's West Africa and on the Côte d'Ivoire. And so my understanding of that culture was zilch. And so once again, I had this hunger just from the upbringing of being around Filipino families and Italian families. What does this mean? And so I think, to your question around my upbringing, an unending curiosity of where we come from and how we really communicate with each other really informs my own curiosity around how I operate in the world. The case in point was Edom was his name, and still is his name. Edom came up to me and gave me a shirt from his tribe in Africa. And I, of course, had a J. Crew, like, fisherman knit sweater. And I said, I'm going to give you this sweater because this is from my tribe, the preppy tribe of J. Crew. But I think, if anything, that also goes back to the point of, when you own your story and you don't apologize for it, and you give yourself I was always and always have been supported so well emotionally by my family and by those around me, that I always felt a degree of empowerment by that. And so that my curiosity wasn't out of a sense of inferiority, it was more out of sense of how can we work together. And I took those experiences in Paris and came back to the States and started Cure Organic Farm, really as a way to grow food and to be part of a larger community And that really entered into something that I had really no experience in, but once again, this curiosity of what that meant. And so the well-being that was brought from the farm really opened up to slow food and Terra Madre, which is this huge held every 2 years, that's not biannual, over in Turin as a celebration of local food cultures from all over the world. And then also at that same time that we started Cure Organic Farm here in Boulder, Colorado, Bobby Stuckey and Lachlan Patterson started Frosca, and then Hugo Matheson and Kimball Musk started The Kitchen. You always have these moments in your life where symmetry and synchronicity just follow suit. So they said, we're starting these little restaurants. And we said, great, we're starting this little farm. How do we work together? And within 4 years, Boulder was named the foodiest town in America. And that was really quite astonishing, coming from really just this more gung-ho spirit and this curiosity of how we can make a living through growing food and helping each other, which has then blossomed into an exploration of hospitality and being and how we nurture and nourish each other, not only through the food that we share, but through, as I've evolved, through the stories that we share. And so now I'm doing more in regards to writing and collaborating and consulting in these same areas of food, hospitality, how we treat each other. And it's really now in the form of comfort food and the things that hold us together. And so that's really been the new glue holding my work together. What are the things that hold us together as a community? And food is such a staple. If you don't eat, you're not going to last that long. So you better find some good food and really find your community of how we can nourish and enhance each other's lives. Long answer to a short question.
I appreciate there were a couple, your language speaks to your heart. There were a couple times in just naming the university experience or even as a child, you were hungry for. And I think it's the language of the soul. And there's something in it that aligns us with how we are really here to enjoy, support, as you said, each other, and really build a strong network. That network, a little like mycelia, right? And I love you were able to share that story because it was a golden thread that I'm sure will continue through this podcast.
It speaks also to what you're doing. You're giving people the liberty to really speak their story, and everyone's story resonates with everyone's else, with everyone with their story, because of the reason that the location can be anywhere, but the through line, to your point, is that it's an authentic experience. And if you own your story, you'll be amazed. I know I have been by where it takes you, but you first have to own it.
Yes. So in college, did you study the culinary arts or gastronomy in Paris?
You do by default, just by living there, right, in the markets. And really, Adam really showed me, he would take me to the African markets where they would have these snails that were like the size of a table, right? And these plantains, that whole immigrant culture in Paris is so alive, right? So you would be able to, whether it's going into the Chinatown there or going into, like I said, the African market, but then you have the classic French cuisine and their farmers markets that are so plentiful that strawberries, the asparagus, all of this. And I think I did not study it. I actually studied cultural studies and philosophy. That gave me the liberty of this huge umbrella of saying, and it was a very privileged experience, and I'm forever grateful for my family for providing me this, is you would study a culture plus, but in all aspects of it, right? You would study the architecture, the writing, the novels, the thinkers, the government, the travel, the hospitality, everything, the food especially, of that particular culture. So we did Paris, we did Vienna, we did Venice. It was for me, I was like a gift. I was like, this is me. That's why when I saw it, I was like, you guys, I found my calling, and I'm going to study all these things that I love to such a degree that I'm going to take it forward through the rest of my life. And so what we would do is for Paris, obviously you'd go to the classic brasseries, you'd go to the great restaurants, you'd study the great thinkers. And for me, it was really a bath of really just immersing myself in those cultures. And then in Vienna, the same thing. You'd go to Demel, the chocolatier, and really just be like, oh my God, can you wrap me in this box of chocolates and just leave me here for the rest of my life? And, but then also you study Freud and going to Bergstrasse number, I think it's 10, if my memory serves me correct, and going to his apartment and seeing where psychoanalysis was born, and then reading all of Freud's works and jumping off from there and going to Venice and studying all the architecture and the Jewish ghetto and eating in that part of town. And it wasn't a tourist. It was really like, hey, we're going to give you guys this Orient Express experience of the immersion of culture, and but not in a sense of the Baedeker guide. This is like, we're going to go deep into this so that, number one, if you're going to go into diplomacy, if you're going to go into government, if you're going to go into, my career path initially was going to be into UNESCO in cultural studies and being for World Heritage sites. My task at hand was really immerse myself in all of those experiences and take my own personal cultural background of being an American and apply that to that. But to your point, more along these lines of well-being and happiness, what I saw and what I experienced was that throughout those particular cultures of Italy, Austria, France, those are really the hubs, right? You think of they live, the cultural traditions, and still is something that I take dear to my heart, in that what are you doing on a daily basis to continue traditions that are time immemorial, whether that be recognizing the coffee that you drink, taking the time to actually acknowledge it, right? These are these little life hacks that, like I said, I don't, in any sense of the word, take for granted those opportunities that I was given. And so I utilize those opportunities in all facets of my life, whether that be in the partnership that I have with Callie, whether that be in being a father to Georgia and Lauren and giving them those opportunities, and really being like, hey, if you need references, I'm here. And so that sense of empowering and tutoring, and I do a bunch of stuff with CASA and their incredible program of kids, and just really putting yourself forward, that education and that staying teachable, I think, if anything, has really been, once again, that's been the golden ladder for me, has been like, I don't know what you guys are talking about, but let me learn. And I had that was really bred in me from childhood, but then also through my, if I can call it, my sentimental education in Europe, if I can borrow from Gustave Flaubert. That degree of staying teachable and staying willing to learn, that has been really for well-being and happiness. Staying curious has always been my greatest source of happiness, saying, I don't know. I don't know how to drive a stick shift. Teach me. And that comedy. And so if anything through my writing that I'm really loving is the comedic, and not in the sense of denigrating anything. If anything, I denigrate myself in the sense of what I don't know, but of the sense of, look at how we love each other, and it's sloppy, but the intention is always pure, and that is to try to better understand and love one another.
Yes, you have an insatiable appetite in more than one way, and that, I think, is, to your point, going back to the micro moments, right, of the coffee or the ritual that you have in your day. It's actually, in my view, adaptogenic, because the intelligence and the connection and that comfort to be released inside. And
Right.
Then other people are having a greater experience of you because you've taken the time to distill down what it is that helps you come alive. And I just got to know you. Thank you, LinkedIn. And so I immediately found this comfort in having a conversation and our cadence via email. And it was purely organic. and divine timing, of course. But when we go to Europe, and I gave up living in the States after my first career, and I wanted to go and live over and work in Europe. And I did for close to 3 years. And then when I came back, I had to adjust because there was an ease of living in Europe. And anybody who's been over there or visited various countries, you feel a little like this insatiable appetite for you to learn all the facets of what you did in college, that it's just that we're taking it in at such a multi-sensory level because of the history, because of the UNESCO qualities. Like, we don't have those here.
Oh, but we do. I think that's something I want to talk about.
Okay,
Yeah.
go for it.
I mean, that's where I've really, you never feel more American until you go to Europe. And it's like the classic Tom Waits line, which is I'd never been to the West Coast until I went to the East Coast.
Yeah.
And that really, it was both, to your point around living in different cultures. What I've come to understand and learn and really love is I never felt more American than when I went over and lived over there. And still when I go back, I'm always like, I'm an American, but with multicultural knowledge. But I celebrate the burger and fries and that sense of, man, it's coming from such a good-hearted space of what American culture is, this kind of like proletariat. Here we go. Here's your corn cob. Here's your potato. Here's your cheeseburger. Let's get started. And so like that, and once again, that Midwestern mentality of let's get some stuff done. I think that, to your point around when you go to different cultures and how you incorporate that identity, because obviously we're all immigrants, right? We're all coming from somewhere, just how many generations back. And I think that incorporation has, especially post-grad for me, was huge in the sense of like, how do we take our experiences and or our projections of what another culture is, and how do we integrate and reinforce those traditions, rituals, beliefs that we found so comforting and so uplifting, and how do we translate it into a way that we bring back into our, I hate to say like our native culture, but maybe just the culture that we were born into. So I think that has really been such a huge challenge and a really big gift, because as we all know, there's always a degree, and this is what we were talking about previously before the call, about hospitality, and that there's a degree of value of what we value within that culture, whether it be a sense of liberty or a sense of, oh my gosh, like this resonates so strongly with me, right? And we all see this, right? You go, hey, I was born into a family or a culture where I was like, man, this is not my song. Like, I did not get the sheet music to this musical here. wrong actor here. Then you go to a different culture and you go, this is it. This is what I found to be my truth and my well-being and my happiness. I think to your point around when you leave a job and you take that next step, that whatever drew Allison to Europe and whatever fed Allison in Europe was there all along, but it just wasn't the right recipe. It just wasn't being served right, but it was being served, right? Excuse me, that's just an odd sentence. But that same intent was meant for you here, but it just got lost in translation. But when you went to Europe and you got served in a different manner, you were like, ooh, like I was more open to it. And I know for when we travel, your senses are blooming in the sense of what they're intaking. Mm-hmm. And so when we're in our routines at home, and I think if anything, this is a good lesson that I've really been trying to harbor in with the book, is the difference between routine and ritual, and how you make the routine a ritual. And I think I've seen this through a golf teacher who has extraordinary golf. And he says, like, how do I teach the same swing for the next 20 years and keep it interesting to me each and every day, so that I'm in a constant state of learning. I'm in a constant state of awareness and amazement and comedy. Wow, that's really not the way to do it. But wow, like maybe there's a new way to do it. Maybe there's a new way to swing the golf club. So I think if anything, there's the willingness to evolve that you showed in that trip to Europe. Was your body finally felt and your heart finally felt, and this is something I just resonate with, and that's why I'm sharing. It's because I was in that same space where I was hungry for something and it finally was being given to me in maybe a more off-center way, that I was like, ooh, that's it. That's the secret sauce, or that's the right note. And to be a little poetic here, we all are composers to our own life.
Yes.
And so what music are you composing that you're like, this is my song? And it's evolving, and sometimes it's jazz, sometimes it's reggae, sometimes it's rap, sometimes it's classical, sometimes it's John Cage silence. But if you really own that, and this is something, once again, we were talking about, give yourself that autonomy to own your story. And that has always been the greatest sense of well-being and in ease, is when I own my own story and I say, I don't deny certain aspects, and I say, yeah, it's everything. This is the song that I've been writing. And it's a really beautiful moment when we all reach those accepting moments in our lives of joyful noise in what it is that we love to hear. Yeah. Sorry, I was going on my little poetic riff there.
I
So
love
thank you for giving me
it.
some.
We'll give it to you to own. Joyful noise. Because
Right.
with all the noise in media that is grabbing our attention and depleting our energy, going back to autonomy, right? Like figuring out how you want to be in the world, so then you can do in the world, and then you can have in the world. And this capacity to understand it's all part of us, right? We're not trying to shut it out, but what we're wanting is to cultivate the capacity to hear and lead ourselves no matter what is going on in the world. The transformations that we're having on a global scale ever since COVID, really unlocking the next level and the next level and the next level.
And this is the part where, when you can, and this is something we all around the globe are trying to achieve, which is looking at every situation that we're in as a challenge and not a block. There's the great line of challenge is an opportunity for invention, right? And that degree, which is sometimes you don't want to live a bumper sticker life and sound trite or disingenuous in your advice, or you can also be like, I just got back from the doctor and I was told I have cancer. I'm not really feeling that optimistic at the moment.
Right.
And so with a father who has dementia, we all come to our lives with challenges that we have to accept and take as an opportunity for innovation. And so I think what you were saying around owning your story and giving yourself license is really, once again, the reason you're going to have a great day is because you've chosen to have a great day. The reason that you're going to get a job is because you've chosen to put yourself forward to get a good job. And that degree of, there's a lot of people who speak in this space, whether it be Brene Brown or whoever, who are so eloquent and knowledgeable on this, but it's a team effort, right? It's a team effort on this one, right? So we all have to pass the ball. So if I'm past the ball here in this space, it's to say the way you change your life is by changing your life. And nothing changes if nothing changes. A great friend said, you got to live your way into a new way of thinking instead of thinking your way into a new way of living. And so take those actions, right? Even if you're like, oh my gosh, this is the most uncomfortable pair of pants I've ever put on in my life, right? But if you live that way, your thinking starts to change. And as we talk about wellness, as we talk about spirituality, if we talk about really the corrective measures that we take in our lives to be more aligned with our greatest self, what that means is that there's always a next rung on the ladder to be reached for. And that ladder is endless in a good way. Either you look at that ladder as, oh my goodness, there are a lot of rungs up there, but then you go, but it never ends. It's always in the best possible way. There's always another iteration of how your life can get better. And when I say better, point, your capacity and your ability to hold all of life's greatest diversity and intentions and complications and difficulties, but you've enlarged yourself to a degree with your spirit that you can say really nothing and just hold that space for it. A friend of mine just got back from Japan, and she was saying one of the great things that she loved about being over in that Eastern culture was that for the majority of the time, people really didn't have an opinion on that much other stuff. Not in a self-centered way, but they were like, okay, I don't have to have an opinion on that. And it's not out of a lack of curiosity. It was just out of a sense of owning your space and saying, at the moment, I'm actually really concentrating on this. I don't have an opinion on that. And I want to reiterate, it's not out of a willful ignorance or cognitive dissonance. It's out of the sense of dedication to your own purpose. And that, like I said, this is a team effort. There are multiple things that are happening at this moment in your own life that you should be grateful that you're not in charge of. Or you might choose the wrong door. Be grateful for the goodwill that's operating in your life, that's taking care of decisions that are better served by other spirits.
Yes, universal grace. Paul, at this point, I'd love for us to move into your work as a freelance journalist and experience of the farm and how it's now become this banquet table for people and comfort food.
Yeah, it's been such a pleasure to be able to marry those two passions of food and writing. And the best way I can describe, and I believe I was talking to you about this, that my writing feels more like a feeling rather than an intellectual pursuit. So I love taking people to the table through words and describing the flavors, the vision, the work that was really brought to the forefront to allow this meal and this journey to really come together.
So who do you write for?
My main outlets are going to be Boulder Lifestyle, Cherry Creek Lifestyle, Iconic Life, and the local newspapers when I go into those communities, whether that be Aspen or Vail. Based here in Boulder, Colorado. The Iconic Life magazine is based in Orange County and Scottsdale, Arizona. So I'm able to really be the eyes and ears for Arizona and California, which is great. And it really allows me to take a person who's in the high desert of Arizona into the high mountains of Colorado. And I really have that person in mind when I'm on a chairlift or when I'm at the, as you said, the banquet table, and trying to describe to them as if they were blind what it is that I'm experiencing, and I hope that they experience it as well.
So for the Iconic Lifestyle, I would imagine people are already seeking the conscious lifestyle and the farm to table field, the organic. They're really invested in their health and well-being. How can you help our listeners understand a broader perspective of how they can bring it in if they're not participating in that iconic lifestyle?
There's the armchair travel that we can all have, that we all love. But there's also the practical, to your point, of how I, boots on the ground, get local food on my table. And the best way that I've always found is a website called localharvest.org. And that allows you to really see farms in your community, CSA, local restaurants that use local food. And it really is a shortcut and a life hack to be able to bring those resources to your table.
So is this in urban areas as well?
Yeah, it's really wherever a farm is located. It can be a community farm, it can be a farmer's market, it could be a rural area, it could be a resort area. As we all become conscious and really heighten our conscious around where our food comes from, there also has to be a provenance to where we want to spend our money, where we want to invest our health in. So that website really allows you to have a Baedeker's guide to your food. If you think about a Michelin guide or the Baedeker guide, this is the local version of it.
Are you aware of how people can take a more active role in their community and help bridge the food gap?
Yeah, this is something that a friend of mine, Lauren, is really working on the forefront of. And she's working with the Beacon Fund here in Denver and an app called Plentiful. And it's based here in Colorado and in New York City. And they've got 2 million people in New York City that use this for their food pantry, and really allowing them to shortcut that. How do I get local food? How do I get, to your point around food waste? During the pandemic, what really sparked her website and her app was they would get these calls saying, from a semi truck saying, I've got 500 chickens ready for rotisserie and I have nowhere to put them. They would go to this food pantry, and then people that were really hungry and needing that nutrition were able to access that. And the app, as we all know, in our modern lives really allows us to say, I want this in this particular way at this particular time. Because easiness or ease in this process makes it less cumbersome and fearful that you're going to wait in line for 2 hours and get a handful of kale.
Yes. I don't know what life looked like before apps, but the harvesting of whatever needs to be cured at that point, whether it's the chicken or the perishable foods, there's no excuse to waste.
Yeah, there is no excuse for waste. And there's also, you have to meet people where they're at on both ends of the spectrum, from a producer standpoint and distribution to a person that's incredible. And sometimes a bag of Cheetos is a lot more appealing at the moment than a salad. And I was just at the Big Green fundraiser, Kimball Musk's, incredibly hungry, just looking for nutrition endeavor around community gardens. And San Antonio and Memphis have got incredible food distribution efforts to combat the food desert that is there. So you have to commend the individuals who are really on the ground level making this possible for people to get food.
And that's your Instagram handle, very close to, right? For Common Ground.
It is a pun, with my history of the farm. And then I do have a very King Arthur chivalrous streak that aims for the good and the pure and the beautiful.
Share a little bit about your book that you're writing and how it might be relevant for our listeners.
Yeah, thank you, Allison, for this ability to plug my book that I'm writing around the concept of what it is that really fed us in our youth. And that could be food, that could be experiences. It can also be that gateway experience that really opened us up to lowering our shoulders and opening our hearts. And so I've been interviewing chefs, restaurateurs, community members, and community leaders, really around those first experiences that bind our ambitions with our practical experience. It's been a pleasure to be able to really listen and to bear witness to people's stories, which is something that I love. And so the book is going to come out in the spring, of course, first Primavera. And the first greens of spring will be a book for me. And it's really been more of a true north for me to follow really this concept of consulting around how we as people and then businesses and municipalities, the comfort food that is really nourished us is a comfort food of bearing witness to each other. And when we allow ourselves to sit at a table and share stories, that where the true connection occurs. So I've been really at this moment to experience many meals and many stories, which I'm really excited to share with others and to really bring it into a more integrated aspect of my consulting around how we as communities find common ground and find a common purpose.
It sounds like an extraordinary opportunity for people to sit at the table from different stakeholder positions. It could be family member to family member within a friend group or conscious dinner party where nobody knows really each other except the host has the connection with each of the guests, and or in a business opportunity. But it very much feels like chicken soup for the soul.
Yeah, and that's something, when you put the bat signal up on the flat irons here that you're writing a book on comfort food, suddenly all these people come out of the wilderness, so to speak. And so I recently befriended Tim from Longer Tables, and he does this. He just had a 528 person dinner in Center Park in Denver, precisely to encourage no titles, no background, just be and come as you are. And then, of course, the work of Callie Kavanaugh with her Eat-In method, which is, groundbreaking in its attitude towards bringing that same love and dedication that we bring to our work, bring that to your food and bring that to your family and what it is that you create in your home. So I feel very grateful to be able to meet these people and to have them as friends and as co-conspirators in the never-ending quest for fulfillment.
Oh, that brings it full circle to the title of the show, How to Nurture Well-Being Through Food, Family, and Friends. Paul, thank you so very much. To let our listeners know, halfway through recording, Wi-Fi just decided to drop. So this is the second half of the recording, and we appreciate you bearing with us and listening to the full podcast episode. I feel Paul is really a curator, and you're curating all that's good.
Thank you, Allison. You are doing such good work, and it's just such a pleasure to partner with such an incredible person like yourself and the audience that you have. So if there's one takeaway, everyone just sit down at the table together and be grateful for that moment that you get to share. Oh, thank you, Allison. The best to you and your listeners.
Are you enjoying Discover Wellbeing? If so, I would love to hear about it. Leaving a review helps more people find us and really makes a difference. So share your thoughts on Apple Podcasts or your favorite platform. Your feedback supports our show and helps spread the message of well-being.